Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is John Betancourt. John's been on the podcast before, so John, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Krish.
John's the CEO of Humantelligence. We're going to talk about sales, and the topic is, and the title I should say is Sales, the Most Misunderstood Function in Business. That's the title John came up with, and it's as good as any that I could have come up with. So we're going to talk a lot about sales. But before we do that, John, a little bit about yourself for folks who have not yet seen or watched the last podcast, about yourself and your company.
Yeah, so I'm a software SaaS AI product startup guy. It's been 10 years. We did not start off as SaaS. We didn't start off as AI. We are in the HR technology world, and we make a product that is an AI coach that personalizes talent management, talent development, and leadership development, as well as team collaboration and engagement. Career was 15 years at large corporations like Procter & Gamble, Reebok, Puma, a large company called Decathlon, software company called Siebel Systems, which was bought by Oracle. It's like a CRM product. And then I was 15 years a top executive search consultant at Heidrick and Struggles and Korn Ferry. To note, I was never a salesperson, but as founder-led sales goes, running a software company, I've had to learn the ups and downs of sales and how hard of a function it is to actually do it and what a science it is. And so I have some tips that might be helpful for people out there looking to start a company and selling their products.
I have no doubts. Thank you so much, John, for the introduction. And again, before we get started, I'm going to tell folks the last conversation that I had with John was amazing as well. If you haven't already checked out the podcast, either the video or the audio versions, definitely go to Spotify or Apple or whatever is convenient to you. The title of that podcast was From Gut Feel to Guided Intelligence: Reinventing Talent and Sales with AI. So we had a lot of chat about AI, the impact of AI on leadership and talent development. Today, we're going to talk about a slightly different topic, but I'll be surprised if AI did not make its presence felt. It almost always does today in any conversation, even at the dinner tables, right? So, back to the topic, or getting started with the topic, the most misunderstood function in business: sales. So, John, let me give you a quick background to give context to you and the audience. So, our startup, right, the Snowball, we've been in business many years. We are a product company, yada, yada, yada. A lot of us are engineers, all of us. I was going to say most of us, but all of us actually. And when we focused on building software, we did that, right? We did that, and that's all we continue to do on a daily basis. But what some things have changed. Maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, a little bit lesser. If you had asked me, Krish, what's the most important thing for a product to be successful, it would have taken me like less than half a second to respond with a great product, John. Is that even a question? You build a great product, that's all you need. It's going to find a way to sell itself. You said something towards the end of our last podcast, and I got super excited because I've heard that before, but the way you said it was really nice as well. You said, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but you said, even if you had a great product, it's certainly not going to sell itself, right? People are not going to break through the front door, grab the product and go and pay for it and say, you know what, this is what I've been looking for. You've built exactly what I've wanted, and I don't want anything else but this. As silly as it might sound, John, that's almost exactly what, not just me, a lot of people in my team thought when we focused on building software. Because, it was challenging. We built a number of things. We continue to do that. We didn't have the energy or the time, sometimes even the interest, to want to focus on other things. And we thought it was a distraction. But then after we built our web app, then our mobile app, then our APIs and the education platform and whatnot, as our suite expanded, we recognized that people have to know that you exist, your company exists, that your product exists. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, what is the point in building it if you cannot sell something, right? And then we started appreciating sales for the very first time in our lives. And then a year goes by. The last year, we've built less software and focused more on sales, right? I mean, that changes every 6 months or so, the balance. But we've recognized the importance of sales to the point that I've had a large number of conversations with people on the podcast where we've exclusively talked about sales, right? With sales engineers and folks who have done this a while. So that's a quick background. My first question to you is, does this come across as a surprise to you, or is this what you've kind of heard from engineer-led startups in general?
I think it's not a challenge with just engineers. I think everyone just has this assumption that if you have a great product, it will sell. I don't think people realize that there's so many moving parts to get to a closed deal. Everything from having a budget, but first you got to have a meeting. You can't sell a product if you don't have a meeting. But to get a meeting, you got to do marketing, right? And to do marketing, you have to fill the funnel and do lead gen, at least in SaaS products, and get a top of the funnel filled up, and then have that, filtered down by SDRs, BDRs. So you have to have like these lower level salespeople who are filtering the opportunities to then hand them over to the account executives who don't waste their time and know that a meeting is going to be with a qualified lead, and that meeting then gets moved into the next stage, and the next stage they say there's 12 touch points before a close. So you're already looking at 2 or 3 months. You're looking at money to hire a marketing person or teams, plus money to do the actual advertising, plus money to have the whole technology stack, because today marketing is a tech role and you need to connect about 5 or 6 tech stacks. So to do a sale, you actually have to put together a whole technology stack of 5 different platforms that are all working together. You have to have a marketing person managing that, working seamlessly with a sales team of lower level people qualifying leads, so a senior person, all the way to that senior person, account exec, kind of nurturing a lead 7 to 12 times over 3 months. That is a scientific, exhausting process that also needs the nuance, finesse of personality to bring it all together and not come across as selling. I think it's the hardest function in business. Done finance, I've done marketing, I've done general management, operations, and I thought sales would be the easiest. It actually, for me, has become the hardest thing in my startup.
And I could not agree more, John, because it's hard and harder and the hardest to me, in my opinion, for a number of different reasons. If you talk to a developer and say, what, build a piece of software, building software is not easy. Nothing is easy in life. Building software isn't easy either. But at least, you can have a certain personality that you've had in your life. If that works in your favor to build software, meaning say you're an introvert, not that you have to be one, but if you are one who like to sit in your shell, in your cocoon, and focus on building software, understand requirements, and do the best, a lot of us are able to do that. You don't have to change your personality to build software. You have to learn new tools, new technologies, sure, right? You need to understand the team, you need to be a good person, talk to business, talk to requirements, and whatnot. One of the things that makes sales much harder for me and people like me in my team as well is we were not built necessarily to be salespeople. Building software, again, you can find your comfort zone and just keep put your heads down and do in isolation. With sales, there shall be no comfort zones of any kind. Prospecting on LinkedIn, sending the first message takes us a lot of pain and effort. Is it okay to send the message to John, or should I not send it to John? Can I not? Can I not? It takes us a lot of thinking.
And rejection.
And I was going to
I
say
mean,
that.
I write to probably 200 people a week and only get 3 or 4 responses.
You know what? I was going to
Like,
ask you something, but
that's exhausting. That's
how do
so,
you
yeah.
how do you not take that? And some of
Personally,
these are not rhetorical questions. I'm asking this genuinely. How do you not take that personally? Because we've done that stupid thing of taking those things personally till my wife would be like, Krish, you don't know them. What's personal about this, right? So how do you not? I mean, have you ever taken something like that personally, John? If so, how have you found your way out of that?
what's interesting is I don't get hurt when I send out emails, whether they're blast emails or me writing them and spending 10 minutes specifically on somebody and pulling out from their LinkedIn. Oh, you went to this college. Do you know this person? Oh, I see that you're, follow this group. And I'm well, like very specific, 10 minutes to write one LinkedIn message. None of those people I don't know. I have thick skin, I guess. I just know it's part of the process. You got to just be out there. What really hurts is when you find someone on LinkedIn that's an old friend or someone that you spend a lot of time with and that you think, okay, at least they'll give me 5 minutes or a 10-minute call. It's those people who either A, don't respond or respond and say they're too busy. Actually, it hurts more when they say they're too busy. Like, don't rather not respond because it's like, oh my God, like this is like someone I spent 20 hours a week with in college for 4 years and they were like a good friend and I did things for them. And I'm only asking for 30 minutes and they're saying no. That really hurts. So, and I think back to your point around an engineer living, in a silo by themselves. I
No,
think
wait,
what you're
John, sorry to interrupt you, but before you go, so that hurts. And I see this, all of us experience that when it comes to sales, right? We're like, you know what? I went to college, I spent a lot of time. I believe we know each other, but for some reason, right? Life happens, people change, they're busy.
I think
This
it's
is
they're
not.
busy. People are busy and they don't look to their past and they don't look at their future and they're like, what do I have to get done today? And the only people I want to talk to are the ones who are going to help me move my current project at work forward. And that means they're at my company or a client or someone I need to attend to because they're my customer or my family. That's all people have space for after the age of 40. And they're not open, I think, to
So is it,
touch
so
base
John
with
is,
someone from their past. Because
so John, is that,
if there's not a direct, I can get something from this, I think people don't put any time in. It's horrible.
so to me, that sounds, hear me out, right? Sounds a little bit myopic because let's say I trade quite a bit. When you do day trading versus investments, the way you look at a particular security is completely different, right? If you're day trading, I don't know, SoundHound AI, right? One of the companies that it's pretty volatile, versus you're investing in the long term on Nvidia. They're two companies reasonably in the same tech space, right? Even though they're quite different from each other, but you look at them very differently and you make decisions based on that. Now, each one, here's where I'm trying to tie these two together in terms of analogy. It is, are people a bit more myopic than they should be? Meaning, I'm working to my current job. That's important. My current day is very important. But that's kind of like day trading to me. Sure, it's important, right? If you're in the business, but I also need to keep an eye out on those long-term investments that change $1,000 to $1,000,000. So if you sort of shut yourself from these messages that are coming, and I'm not saying most messages are useful. We all get a lot of spam. It's not like that's just is the way, the nature of the beast. But by completely disregarding or ignoring these messages, is it possible that you're letting go of some opportunities? Maybe it's opportunities for growth or opportunities to completely change your career. Could you actually have sort of missed the mark on
Well,
that by ignoring these?
I agree with you. The people who are not open to the serendipity of life, changing their life overnight because they just happened to a random 30-minute call with someone from their past, that's the beautiful part of life. I take those calls every week. I'll do 3 or 4 that people reach out to me and I'll say yes. I'm just saying my experience has been 95% of the world's population, at least business people in the US, if someone is not in their life today, they assume that nobody in the world matters to them. Like there's no one else they need. It's
So
really
which mean
remarkable to me.
so
But
which means, how do you deal with these? Like, one of the sales guys I talked to, he told me, Krish, we are very hesitant to send a second follow-up message. He goes, that's crazy. How could you not do that? Because he said there's like 7 touch points, and sometimes he mentioned Instagram and other social media, whatever accounts. He said there could be 21 touch points, and I think you said there was a number in
12,
between, right,
I thought
John?
it was
12.
12. Yeah.
12. What does 12 mean, John? Does it mean you reach out? If I reached out to John to want to sell something, does it mean that I reach out to John like 12 times?
Yeah, there's different things that qualify as a touch point. Maybe it's 4 or 5 emails. They finally give you a meeting. You have the meeting. You do a follow up note, send them the materials. Then they have a next meeting. Now you're on like number 7, and then in that next meeting you decide to do a trial, and then you go back and forth. So I mean, it's either a call or a message or a meeting. It's 12 total that usually lead to your first deal, and that usually is over 3.5 to 4 months.
Oh, I
And
see what you mean.
yeah, and there was a point you made earlier around engineers working in silos by themselves. I think part of the reason why that's slightly easier than sales is everything's under your control. The quality of the code you write is under your control. The deadline that you agreed to that you'll have it done by is under your control. You agree, okay, I want a deadline. They're going to say, can you do it by tomorrow? Well, no, it's going to take me
Right.
3 weeks. Now, if you miscalculate and you need 5, but you got to
No,
do
no,
it
I
in
get the
3,
point. Yeah, totally.
right? But it's still most of the time, if it's a well-run process in software engineering, it's pretty much under your control. You might have to work with other people in a more complex code, right? But still, you can work. You know what their expectations are, and you're all driving, and it's usually an internal project, all driving to the same timelines and dates, right? But when you're doing sales, you don't know if the product you're selling is going to be ready to be delivered. You don't know the people you're selling to if they have a budget. And at any moment, the budget might be taken away from them. You don't know if the person you're selling to is a true decision maker, but usually there's 3 or 4 different people that are decision makers, and you're trying to figure out who's a decision maker. And so all these steps are completely out of your control. You don't control if the economy's bad and all of a sudden people don't have budgets to spend on your product. You don't know if there's a competitor that's also pitching them, that they might decide to go for that competitor because the price is cheaper, right? You don't know if maybe you just don't get along with the person, right, that you're selling to. Like
So how,
there's
so
so many elements. They're just out of your control. It's quite everything has to align to close a deal. It's really remarkable.
everything has to align, and plus it's a lot of art involved, right? Engineering coding is mostly science, right? I mean, there's some element of art, but not a whole lot, I
Yeah,
think. Whereas when it comes to sales, these moving parts are all different, right? John is in a certain mood. You mentioned that you had a big party, and then over the weekend and stuff like that. John, the John I talked to last week, uh, was the same John, but the mood may have been different, right? Because before the party and you had a bit more energy, or you know what I mean. Things change all the time, so even the same people, even during the course of the same week, could have a slightly different perspective because maybe they are ready to make certain decisions, or maybe ready to have those conversations, or they're just not in the mood to having those
yeah.
conversations in that
Or
window
the
of time.
board decided that they don't want AI right now, and then like 3 months later, they do want AI products. Like there's again other things that are out of that person's decision making, even as a buyer. So things are out of my control as a salesperson. They're often out of the control of the person buying. And there's just so many elements. It it
You said there are 12 touch points, right? But you said that was to closing a deal. Let me ask you, how many times, I mean, there's no simple straightforward answer, but just with your experience, John, how many times do you reach out to somebody before they've responded to you? Is it once, twice, thrice, or 4 times, or whatever that number is, before you're like, you know what, maybe I should not because they are not interested?
First off, unless you have an automated system, it's really hard to reach out more than once or twice. Because if you're reaching out to, let's say, 1,000 people in a month, you will never remember everyone in how many times, and where was the last message and through what platform. So usually you automate that where the system just has, these
A
different
sequence, right? A
messages,
sequence where you
the
set those
sequence
things
where
up.
it's just going to go out on a week later or 2 weeks later. What I find is in those sequences, and these are usually people I don't know, right? People I know, I write to twice, 3 times, and usually on the third, I'll get a response if they're going to respond. But again, like I would say half the people I know don't ever respond. In terms of the sequence for people I don't know, like cold outbound in email or in LinkedIn, you know, I think it's like we have a sequence right now with like 8. Like there's 8 messages. And usually it's like the seventh one, sixth or seventh one that they finally like acquiesce and say, okay, sure, I'll meet, or okay, or no, I don't have a budget. I mean, even a negative, but I'll get some kind of response by the seventh.
But this is amazing. So, John, whatever you're telling us right now, not just me, I promise you, a lot of the people watching this or listening to it are people, at least over the years, have been developers and engineers who want to start companies and whatnot. So, you know what you might think, I'm not saying you do, but if you think this is obvious, why is Krish asking? I promise you, nothing is obvious, right? Nothing, especially when it comes to sales, nothing is obvious. So, what you're saying is you actually can have a sequence of 8 follow-ups in a week's time or so, right? Which
Not in one
means,
week. 8. I don't like doing it too much, so I never do anything in the same week. Some people argue that you should do 2 a week. I do one, and then like the next 3 are like a week later, and then numbers 4, 5, 6 are separated by 2 weeks, and number 7 and 8 are like 1 month apart.
okay, that is great to know. Thank you so much personally from me and my team to actually for having shared that. But if you did it through, say, LinkedIn, if I were prospecting somebody, I send a message to John, hey, John, we have these APIs on Snowball that you could benefit from and build software. Say we didn't hear back from you. Would you do that many times on LinkedIn as well, or would it be a slightly different number on LinkedIn?
I personally do the same on LinkedIn as well as email, and the same duration apart.
Okay, perfect. This is amazing, right? And again, I'm going to just pause for a moment here and tell people, I'm just sort of speak to myself, to the camera, and to people like me who are building companies. I want to say that, we've built so many products over the years, right? Snowpal is a multi-product company. But our importance that we've started associating with sales happened not at the top of our investments in our product work. It was not even in the early part, not even in the middle, not even till we launched and went live. It was after we went live, after we thought, you know what, there the product does X, Y, and Z, it promises to do X, Y, and Z, and it just does that. So we should have no trouble. But reality was different, right? Given that, John, when should sales make its presence and in what form or shape? In other words, I have an idea to build something, right? I just an idea. Everybody has ideas. Not all ideas see their way through to, most of them don't, right? So I wake up every day with 3 ideas, and then at the end of the week, I feel like I had 15 of them. Only one of them makes some sense. And then next week, I'm like, even that does not make any more sense. I want to get to that actually in a second. I want to jump the gun. But let's say, when do you start thinking about sales? And how do you sort of organically incorporate sales into the realm of building software?
Yeah, well, I would recommend not waiting until the product is built to try to sell it. I think before you even build it, before you even have an MVP, you socialize, which is in a form sales. You socialize with a couple key potential clients or the potential buyer persona, and you ask them, hey, we're thinking about building this product. It would have these kind of features. It would solve this challenge that we believe you and people in your position at your level have. How does that sound? Would that be something you'd be interested in? What would you think about a tool that did XYZ and cost this much money? Does that sound like a painkiller? Like it would really solve a big problem, or like a nice to have? And go and get that validation from several people that you're potentially down the road going to sell to before you even start building a product and coding it. Because a lot of times, if the idea does not come from the market and the idea comes from your own mind, you're likely to be falling into the trap that you think something's a good idea. At Procter & Gamble, they trained us that we will never have the idea, that the market always has the idea and the iterations. And as long as you're constantly adapting and being agile to what the market's telling you, you'll win 7 of 10 times against anybody else. Because most companies, they're really being driven by the people who have their ideas, and that doesn't win long term over time. You could have one great idea, but a product isn't one idea. A product is the inception's the idea, and then it zigzags, and within 3 years, it's nothing like the initial product idea. So you've got to always kind of be bending and responding to what the market wants. So that whole process starts with talking to the potential buyer or the persona of the potential buyer or the companies that would be your clients. Um, and then those would also, once you build it, you'd go to them and say, hey, we now have a prototype, we have an MVP. We'd like to let you use it for free. You said that it would be interesting and solve certain problems for you. Do you mind trying this for free and giving us feedback? And then that's where you get like real detailed UI UX feedback, and product market fit feedback. And that's when you really invest to build it out and scale. And then you would hire a salesperson and then start investing in marketing to sell it.
Okay, great points, but I have a number of questions there. Some by experience, actually, all of them by experience, I think, if not most of them. First thing is, you mentioned the approach makes complete sense, right? Before you actually invest your time and energy, you have an idea, you socialize it by way of sales, with people you worked with in the past and in the folks in that community, potential end users or consumers and customers and whatnot, and say, you know what, this is what I'm trying to build. Does it make sense? Here are the challenges there, right? John says, internet always attributes codes to the wrong person, but I'm just going to go with what the internet says. At least the code that's credited to, I think, Henry Ford, which is, I believe Ford or somebody, whoever said this, was, if you went and asked people in the early 1900s what they wanted, they would have said fast horses and not necessarily cars. Now, that's my first question to your suggestion there, right? Which I completely agree with, but I want to get your thoughts. You're trying to build something new enough. If you ask customers what they wanted, they probably don't even know that there could be such a thing as a car, and they're going to want fast horses. So, is your recommendation that you actually tell them that this is a car and this is kind of what it might do and it's going to replace a horse, and give me your thoughts on it? How do you socialize that? Because it's an idea
That's a
that they're
great
probably
point.
not
Yeah.
used to.
I'm not saying go to the market and have them tell you the products they want you to build. I'm saying go to the market with the idea you have to build a product and get feedback on that idea. Because if somebody had gone to the market back in the Ford days and said, hey, everybody travels point A to B by horse, it takes 2 hours to do this distance. We're going to create a vehicle, a thing with metal that does the same distance in 10 minutes versus 2 hours. Would that be interesting to you at this price? It's really that kind of interaction. It's not, I agree, the average user, consumer, customer, client isn't going to figure out the product. But when presented with a potential product that could solve a problem or challenge they have, either a completely new way of doing it, they will give great feedback that will validate whether you should move forward or not.
Okay. And I have a few more questions there in that regard. But, and again, feel free to ask me anything along the way if what I'm asking makes sense or doesn't.
Do you still ride a horse?
I would love to. So, John, when you're opening a restaurant in a neighborhood, you find out what the demographic is and how affluent or otherwise the community is, what kind of money they want to spend, how many times they might eat out. For every dollar spent on food, how much is being spent on food outside, things of that nature. And you probably open a, let's say, if I were to open an Indian restaurant
Well,
where I
yeah,
live,
you'd want to find out, have there ever been an Indian restaurant that's ever opened in this area?
right, and how far the closest one is, it's
And how far,
vegetarian.
right? The more like, yeah, like for example, in Miami where I live, there are very few Indian restaurants, and the few that are around are doing really well because there's not much in that space. So go ahead, continue with your example.
So the reason I say that is, that's because you're localized to a smaller region. People are going to drive to this restaurant are going to probably most likely live in the 3 to 7 to 10 mile radius. Or if it's something like a downtown, maybe 15, 20, maybe 30 mile radius, but certainly not more than that, right? Even 30 miles, I drive, but I don't know very many of my friends who actually drive 30 miles to eat at a place they want to eat at. Not all the time, at least. So what I'm trying to go with that example is you have a sense of how to approach this problem because the culture, the demographic is in front of you. You walk those streets, you talk to people, you can sense what they might like, what they may not like, and things of that nature. When it comes to selling software, at least this has been our challenge, right? I'll give you a very specific example. But before I gave you that example, I want to get your thoughts. Software is not localized to a region, not necessarily for the most part. You're building SaaS software, like anybody can use it no matter where they live. It could be Eastern Europe, Western Europe, South Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, Africa, or US, or whatnot. So, how do you go about doing this? Because you have a lot of people that you can potentially reach out to find out. And one of the answers I always get is, Krish, talk to people you've worked with in the past, which is fine, but maybe they're not in the same business anymore. Maybe you're building something different. What is the right set of people, if there is even such a thing, John, that you want to reach out to find out as to what you're doing or what you're trying to do or going to do might make sense? Because software is bound to have a broader reach. It's not like opening a restaurant in a neighborhood. So the approach that you use for a restaurant cannot be extrapolated to software. How should you do that?
So one thing that we've always done, and even before I worked at Humantelligence, these kind of outbound callers that have these robocalls where they're just calling people. So you tell them, we're going to build a product for human resources, HR, and it's going to be in recruiting, as an example. And then they can find these lists, either Zoom Info or there's so many of these companies, and they will get the contact information and just literally call 60 to 100 people today, constantly ringing. When someone finally picks up, they're talking to them, and they basically position it as a feedback call, like, hey, work for a company, it's in your space, it's an HR product in your space in recruiting, it would do these things, it would use AI to help you save 80% of your time filtering through 2,000 applicants on LinkedIn to get to the 6 resumes that would be relevant to the role you're hiring. Is that something that's interesting to you? Does that sound believable? What would you pay for a tool like that? And that kind of question feedback without any propensity to buy, just hearing what people say, whether they have a budget or not, doesn't matter. You do that enough, talk to 20 people a week, you talk to 500 people in 6 months that are in those decision makers in that space, you're going to know if you have something that's solving a problem and at what price. So that's how you go about doing that, kind of getting feedback from people who are potential buyers in the space that you're selling to. So just like at a restaurant, you're going to go and survey. Like I'd be standing out there on the mall if I'm going to think about running a space in mall XYZ. I'd go stand there, and when they're going to lunch at the 5 other restaurants that already exist, be like, hey, I see you come to this mall. You must live nearby or work nearby. What if we added an Indian restaurant to the Greek and the Mexican and the Cuban restaurant here? Would you ever stop by for Indian food? Do you see yourself eating once a month, once a week Indian food? Have you ever had Indian food? What's the typical price point you pay for your lunches? So if the dishes we sell are in that same price point, would you give it a try? Why or why not? Right. And similarly, like asking the market, and the market, as we've described, can be different things in software or restaurants. Asking the market questions over and over, hundreds of times, will lead to more products and services that are more on target to what people want.
Okay. So, John, there are things that change over the years, right? I go with an example from Seinfeld. A lot of things in life I can relate to Seinfeld. I know we watched Seinfeld at all, or this particular show, this
A long
episode,
time ago.
a long
That's a
time
while
ago.
back.
So I'll tell you where, George, one of the main characters in the show, says, he talks about, he says he talked to a girlfriend or a potential girlfriend, somebody who's trying to date. He tells her that, hey, the toilet paper has not changed. Lots of things have changed. The toilet paper has not changed over the years. And she was like, oh my God, that's unbelievable, George. I never thought about it that way. And she's very impressed. So George goes back to his apartment. He's telling Seinfeld and Kramer and Elaine about this, how he was so smart and he impressed this girl who's he's going to have a second date with her. And then Seinfeld's like, no, toilet paper has changed over the years. It's become softer. There's more perforations and whatnot. There's more variety. And then Elaine adds more to this list, and George is pissed off. He's like, okay, it doesn't matter. She believed what I said, right? I take this random example because that was about a toilet paper as not having changed or having changed. Now, let me come back to what I'm trying to say there. Everything you said earlier makes complete sense, except I want to ask, if I had asked the same question, John, it sounds to me that that answer would have almost been exactly the same even 5 or 10 years ago. Tell me if I'm right and if I'm not. But if I am right, does it mean that the fundamental tenets of sales have not actually changed because we as people and humans may have adapted to changing conditions and devices and variables and all that cool stuff? But maybe at the core of us as people, we are not that different, because everything that you told me, one, made sense, but two, I feel like it would have made just as much sense 10 years ago as well. So has that approach not really changed over the years?
Two-part answer. In identifying a space to go after with a product or service, the exploration of an idea and questions to the market, meaning people or clients, about what would solve a problem or not or improve their life, that I think has not changed in 50 years. What has changed is once you say, yes, there's an opportunity, there's a need, there's a product market fit, let's go and sell it. That process has changed completely in terms of how to do it. It's tech stacks, it's 12 to 15 touch points, it's high volume, it's fill the funnel lead gen, it's performance marketing, it's a technology role, it's tracking it all with data. It's a completely different world selling it today versus identifying what to sell.
Makes complete sense. So you're saying that the idea is you still have to make that sale. You had to do it 10 years ago. You'll have to make the sale 10 years later as well. But how you go about making that sale has changed dramatically because you have all of these tools and technologies available to you. Makes sense. Based on what you said earlier, you remember I made a bunch of I said I had a bunch of questions. One was the horse and the Ford question. The second is I had listened to Mark Zuckerberg on one of his shows, or I probably read what he had written, which was that ideas are never fully formed, right? He says if we don't have this brilliant idea and then we're like, you know what, let's work to executing that idea, and then we build the product and then everybody's consuming it. I mean, this is coming from Mark Zuckerberg, right? Somebody's running a $2 trillion company. So his point was, you have an idea, you get started, the idea changes, you learn more, you get some feedback, things are difficult, things are different, so you make accommodations, you undergoes lots of changes, and then the end result could be something quite different from what probably you had initially thought about. Now, tell me if you agree with that, and if you do, when I initially went with the other approach of asking people, socializing my original thought with them and getting feedback about that thought, And I ended up making a decision based on that conversation or on those conversations. If you took that in the context of what I believe Mark Zuckerberg was saying, which is ideas are not fully formed, would my outcome and the takeaways from having those conversations with those people, even though it was with good intent, would that actually have not led to an incorrect outcome, John? Because the idea was not actually fully formed and my socializing happened prematurely with that audience.
So great point. I probably should have broken my answer into two pieces. What I was describing was a completely new product that doesn't exist. For just improving something that already exists, that's already solving a problem, but just making it much better or much easier or much faster, then you don't have to do all that question and answer. Because if you know that riding a taxi is painful and expensive, and all of a sudden you can have a car show up at your house and do the same thing for cheaper and not even have to pull out your wallet, you already know that that's going to be a product that's going to do well because it's taking something, just making it better, right? So Uber for taxis, Grammarly, you already knew that the dictionary and thesaurus and grammar were things that were free that nobody looked at because it was too clunky to go and read about it. So you already knew that, but there's lots of content around that. People learn the languages. So if you could put that into your workflow, like a tool called Grammarly, it's basically taking something and just making it easier. Same with a video conference. When Zoom came out, I mean, they just made video conferencing much easier, faster for everyone to do versus before. Like when I was a headhunter, it was $5,000 for a 1 hour video conference, and you needed an IT person to come and set it up every time, right? So for improvement of products, you don't need to do that whole process about asking questions and formulating ideas. Like Zuckerberg, perfect example. That was not a new product. I went to Harvard. Facebook, I could probably pull it off my where is it? I have it here somewhere. Facebook is actually the name. I don't know where it is in my room, but Facebook is the name of the directory of all the students. And it was a physical book with pictures of everyone with 4 sentences underneath, 4 rows, the high school they went to, sports they play, and something else, right? And so you could just go through and had like 4 rows by 8, like 30 people, small pictures, almost like a graduation yearbook, but small. It was this big, you could hold it in your hand, really portable. It was like this. It was this size, very portable. And you took it everywhere your first week, month, because anytime you met somebody, you put an X next to them. If there was somebody who was attractive you liked, you'd circle them and
Right.
you'd talk about it, right? And so all he did was say the internet was happening in 2002. And he was like, wow, it's such a pain in the butt to track this in paper form. Let me just do the Facebook. And it was called The Facebook. Okay.
Right.
Let me just put that book and put it online. So he was just improving and making more accessible that book for people at Harvard. And when it took off and everybody at campus at Harvard basically signed up for the digital version versus the hard copy, then he was like, let me go to Boston University and do it there, and BU and BC. And then obviously he knew that this was a global thing that was going to work everywhere. So, you know, so that's just improving something that already existed. And once he got it taking off, then he added bells and whistles and made it a social site for all things, not just your classmates at school.
I agree. But I'm going to play the devil's advocate. And usually when I play that, I do it intentionally, even though I do not agree with the other side of the story. But in this case, I actually believe in this devil's advocate version strongly as well. And I want to get your thoughts on it. I'll take an example. You know, the Canva founder, Melanie Perkins, I remember reading something when she said, written this. I don't know the exact number, but she said she had made N number of trips from Australia to the West Coast of the US to look for money to build this company. I don't know what the number was, maybe close to 100. She said there's so many rejections, right? There's a number of rejections, and people are like, I don't want to invest in this. This idea is not new, blah, 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 whatever the reason being. But she, as the founder, truly felt that that was a good idea, right? So she did not give up on that idea. And here's my question. I find myself, and I hope it's not just me and other founders as well, where we truly believe in a certain problem, not because it's a manufactured problem, John, because it's a problem you're running into, right? If I am hungry and I cannot find food the way I want to find food, then I try to find if other people have the same problem, right? It's possible that I'm the only one who's hungry and nobody else is. Then that could be me just imagining a problem. But number of times it's not usually the case, right? It's a real problem, but maybe there are existing solutions. Maybe you don't have to build a solution. So we sometimes feel strongly married to ideas, not because it's our idea. It's also because we sometimes believe in our idea. So I'll take this the example of Melanie Perkins. She did not find funding. She could have given up. She could have said, you know what, maybe this is not a good idea. Let me bother not doing it. But what if there are those scenarios, John, where you have an idea and you feel strongly about it, you're just not able to find that initial traction even before you build something? Should you actually deprive yourself from the pleasure of building it if you can actually build it, or should you still go ahead and do it, but maybe do it differently from what you had originally envisioned, maybe cheaper, smaller, whatnot, but still do it, because otherwise a lot of these ideas are just going to end in the cemetery or the graveyards, right? They're never going to see the light of day. How what do you I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that falls into the first bucket, where the one where it's a completely new thing. There's a problem that you're having in your life, in your work, in some process, and you realize this could be done better. Like I could help myself. And wait a second, it probably could help a lot of people, because a lot of people probably have that same problem. Now, instead of just going and building it, and I don't think you need traction like sales, but you do want market validation. When you have that gut feeling that says, this is a major problem, there's got to be a better way. And it's not crazy to think, well, if I think that, other people think that too, right? Because there's just like universal truths. A problem for somebody in China is going to be a problem for somebody in the US. Like a global product is all going to be solved globally the same way. So lots of people should have that problem. So it's not too hard to go out and get that validation, which I think you're using the word traction. I think it's more validation at this point for, hey, I know another designer who thinks it sucks to work on PowerPoint to create something that takes 3 hours. There should be using AI. It should be much easier using this new way of doing it. Let me go ask 5 developers or 5 design people or 100 design people. So I think it still fits under that first category of doing something completely new, whether it's your own random idea because you just had a vision, or because you're having a problem that you're just like, God, that could be done better. I think you still need to go through that process. Like going out and building something in a vacuum just never works, right? Like it's just too risky. Like, and that's like, and I'm not saying it would be easy to raise money, because that's a whole nother problem. You can have a great idea, maybe nobody invests in it because it's too early. We've heard hundreds of examples of some of the biggest unicorns not getting funded and getting turned down by the biggest firms. So I think that's a whole separate problem. Other people might not believe in it. And the
And you have
inventor,
just to add to that, and you have examples of companies being invested in heavily for the product to have gone nowhere. Like one of the things I can remember
yes,
is
probably
the
more of
product.
those. Probably
Yeah,
more of the ones that have bad ideas to get invested in that weren't vetted just because the people knew each other and there was money and they shook their hands
I
like,
don't know
let's
if you
do this.
know this. I'm thinking about this Humane Pin, or one of the companies that created this Humane Pin. I don't know if they got like $250 million in funding. They built it. It's like something you wear. You can press a button and ask questions, and it would answer those questions to you, right? I think it's Humane Pin, if I'm not wrong. Marcus Brownlee, MK PhD, actually did a review on it, and he's done reviews on a couple of those products and said these are terrible products, and lo behold, they've actually shut shop. This is one of them as well, right? So
Yeah,
two
there's
hundred
a
and fifty
lot
million
of,
dollars in funding, and it went nowhere. So I think I hear you, right? A balance of both is what there has to be. In other words, the reason I even brought that up, John, it's not manufactured. There's an idea that I've been sitting on for, I want to say, 2 months now, and I'm very convinced it's a problem that needs to be solved, right? Maybe at some point I'll socialize. We just at the very initial stages of it. So my question to you was not even manufactured; it was quite genuine, and it was genuine on both fronts. We've actually built solutions in the past because we wanted to build them. We have these APIs on the marketplace. There are some APIs that we know that people wanted to actually use, and others where we feel that they could potentially use, right? So it's a combination of both, not all research based or none research based either, right? So I think what you mentioned there is important. I want to talk a little bit more about that. You said building something in a vacuum is never a good idea. And I think it's very important. You said it perfectly and beautifully, right? And I want people who are watching or listening to sort of digest that for a second. It takes a while to digest it, because sometimes you have an idea and you feel very strongly about that idea, and you feel like you want to build it. You're like, I don't care, right? You want to build it. And I'll take two sides of the spectrum. This could be a developer problem as well. See, if you're a non-developer founder, probably you may or may not have the luxury of actually building that without doing a lot of this initial research, because you need some funding. Maybe you have some money that from the past you've saved up or whatnot, but otherwise you need some funding. You need the money, you need to hire people, you need to staff your team before you get going, which is a good thing because you have the time to do the research and digest it and see if it's even a good idea. But the downside is you actually kind of are at the mercy of other people investing in you because you cannot be building it. You take the flip side with an engineering founder, a developer founder. Here is our problem, I'll be honest with you. We would like to get some money to start building. We would like to find out if there's traction. We would like to do these surveys and do this initial socializing and whatnot. But we are also restless. We want to actually build it. And the bad thing is, the good thing and the bad thing, it's a double-edged sword, is that we can actually do it, right? You know what I mean? We can write the code and build it and then see
Right.
what the heck happens, right? That's the good thing. But the bad thing is we end up building too much too soon without knowing whether it should even be built. So my next question to
And you're
you is
missing the first step of sales, in my opinion, which is getting market socialization and hearing
completely
everyone
right.
out.
An important first step.
Yeah, and by the way,
So,
there's a middle scenario because I'm not a
okay.
product engineer, and I did raise money, start a company for product X, right? And then we had trouble. But I do have a team. I have capacity. I'm a non-product guy who now needs to figure out new products. Like every 2 years, we're figuring out new products. And I still think it's very important to go and do the market research and everything, not to raise money to hire a team, but just to tell my team what to focus on the new features and functions in the roadmap. Like every year, we're doing this every year. Like the whole going to market and getting and feeling what's next. And that's like every 3 months, 6 months is like, it's almost built into every month. I'm telling the team what, as the head product manager out in the market, what the market's expecting and what changes we need to do. Like it's not so clean cut like a new company or a company that's engineers. I mean, there's really the
No,
steady
I
state of all companies.
get that. It makes sense. And not all products are disruptive either, right? Even though each of us wants to believe that everything that you're potentially doing is entirely disruptive, a lot of them are not. So I want to talk about a couple of those things as well. But before it's a segue to another topic, I want to ask your final thoughts on. I'll give you Chat GPT, right? I mean, is that a company that actually figured out what people wanted, or did they actually do what they believed they wanted to do, and it turned out that the world consumed it?
That was a clear example of they stole an idea that had already been tested 25 years before, and it was just a relaunch of a product called Ask Jeeves. You can go look it up. Ask Jeeves, when Google came out, way too much information. Who wants to click, read, next page, click, read. Google came out, Google search came out, and it was overwhelming. And everyone was like, okay, pretty damn cool that you could just put in a word and use all this information. But God, how exhausting. What a terrible UI, UX experience of trying to consume all this. So there were people who said, we can put a layer on top of Google called Ask Jeeves, where you just ask the question and then behind the scenes, like a little person's going to go do all the things you would as a user and in 2 seconds give you an answer from the whole internet. So
Right.
that idea is a 25-year-old idea that everyone's already known was the future. ChatGPT was just the first time the technology was able to do it.
Fair
So
enough.
I don't
Right.
even think ChatGPT is a revolutionary idea. It's just transformational that they finally made it work.
Maybe a revolutionary execution more than the idea itself, possibly. Right? No. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so I guess the way I would summarize that part of our conversation is, but let me ask you before I summarize just that part of the conversation. Is it better to be, I know there's no right or wrong answer, John, just like what comes to your mind. Is it better to be a non-developer founder because you kind of have to do all of this research? You're going to have to spend money and you don't want to waste your money, so you prepared, you engage sales and whatnot. Those are the pros, but the cons is you actually do need people to see your idea through. Or do you think it's better to be a developer founder because now you have the luxury of building it, but then you run the risk of building too much too
No,
soon,
well, that to
or
me is
things
a
that people
clear
don't need?
answer. It's less about it doesn't even matter who the founder is. It's who is the CEO who's going to commercialize the product into a business. Going from product to business, you need a CEO who can commercialize it. 9 of 10 CEOs are not product people.
Wow,
They're business commercialization people who can take products and commercialize them. Most product people wouldn't know how to commercialize something if it hit him in the face. Now, there are in technology, a lot of the tech companies have tech people who ended up being CEOs, which is great. But if you look at all companies, all types of companies, that's usually not the case. Now, look, if you're doing a type 2 diabetes pharma product, like you have to be a scientist and a technologist, right? To really found the product. There's no way somebody who's not like a scientist is going to develop a tool like that or a product. And that person might be really good at commercializing it from 0 to a million. But getting that product from $1 million to $1 billion is
Oh, it's a
rarely the
whole
scientist who
different
created the
ball game
product.
altogether, right?
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, no, I agree. So I think I want to hear your thoughts, which I think I got to. I would say, at least as a summary from my side, is there's no single straightforward answer, but everything they've said there, John, makes sense, right? Not we've done this mistake ourselves, right? There's many things that we've built that have not seen the light of day. Like we have n number of products out in production, but that doesn't mean we had n number of ideas, right? We had n to the power of n number of ideas or something along those lines, and we didn't build all of them. Surely we couldn't, but we built a lot more than what we've been able to push to production, right? So that what you're saying is not
Yeah. And
it's
also,
absolutely correct.
if the chief technology officer or the chief product officer was the right person to commercialize the product, you'd see a lot more CEO and chief product officer, CEO and chief technology officer. You almost never see that. I mean, that's
Never
like
see
one
them,
in a
yeah.
thousand, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
the
I'm
proof
not
is in
trying to
the
say that if you're a product person out there or engineer, give up your dreams of starting a company and growing it to 10, $20 million. Like, go try it, but just know what your limitation is, right? For example, even within CEOs, let's say there's a profile of people who know how to commercialize things. Typically, there's a CEO who's great at taking an idea and an initial product from 0 to 1 million or 2 million. And then that person usually taps out and fails going from 2 to 10. And it's a different profile of a CEO going from 2 to 10. And usually that person will tap out and fail going from 10 to 100 million. And this is like proven in every single phase in technology. And then usually that CEO fails at 100 million going to a billion. And so you have these very distinct moments in company growth from 0 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to a billion to 10 billion, where you need different CEOs,
Which I
right?
think one of the examples I can think of is, if I'm not wrong, the Starbucks CEO Brian Nickel. I think he used to run Chipotle, right? When Chipotle was in deep trouble, they hired him, and then there's a huge turnaround. They went from being almost, I don't know, like I remember Chipotle being $375. This was before the split. I can't remember what that split was years ago. They had the food poisoning, and then they plummeted. And I can literally remember I was I was close to Chipotle, and I thought to myself, man, they're doing really poorly now, but I've eaten here all the time. Maybe it's a time to buy this stock, right? I still remember that. I just wish I'd acted upon my instinct at the time. And then things, there's always timing for everything, right? But I think your example there makes a lot of sense, where you're a product person, you think a certain way, you're a business person, you think another way. As long as, ideas don't die in isolation, I think as an engineer, that's my only hope for other people watching this, right? And the reason we even re-provisioned our private APIs and made them public, John, this was the sole reason. It took too much time and money and risk to build solutions, and we wanted to be able to provide these building blocks so people can build these solutions faster. Now, if you took our APIs and used them with AI and AI tools, you can actually build these solutions in much quicker time and cheaper. The hope is for you to socialize your ideas. Either you can go with just the idea, or you can go with something that's functional, not just something that's in theory or in a document or in your mind, but you can showcase something fairly functional to a potential consumer or an user, so they actually can visualize this better. So that's, I think we've come to the sort of the tail end. I've sort of asked you these high level questions, but your answers were pretty specific, right? So thank you for that. As we wrap this up, John, before I ask you for your closing comments about sales, 2 years, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road, how do you think sales is going to change? There are things that you say they are going to stay intact. We've sort of established that. But You've also mentioned technologies evolving where you do things differently using those technologies. I understand that as well. But what other things do you see change or evolve in the next near to long term future when it comes to sales?
Well, I think all the tools for productivity in sales using AI are just exploding, right? Like I've signed up for like 5 already. Like there's one, it's for meeting preparation where it'll take your calendar and the people you're pitching to and scrape everything about the people you're pitching to, the company, their challenges, any articles, and then how your product solves that problem in like a second. So you already have like your pitch deck on the meeting already done, highly researched, right? I mean, that used to take hours and teams of people in seconds. There's another product now that somebody showed me that, I'm trying to always create an ROI, like, oh, using Humantelligence saves 20% on attrition and therefore this much money for you, right? But it's very generic and high level. And it's very hard for any company to say, God, but how does that apply to us? This guy showed me in 2 minutes he goes, okay, what are the companies you're targeting? One, I told him, okay, I'm looking for 1,000 to 5,000 employees who already purchased current assessment tools. So and who have reported some interest in doing X. So he put into his chat GPT or some product he created, and it came out with a outside in kind of like SWOT analysis of how our product, and the top sentence, like on the first slide, would be, we will save your company $2.6 million in 18 months by driving attrition down this much. And then the next 2 slides were all the support. Like, it was just unbelievable. This is all the qualifying questions you would ask in maybe 2 meetings. Already can find that information and do the argument of why this is an ROI for that company, helping them sell it internally. I mean, it's just going to, these productivity tools in sales just make it so much easier to call on more accounts, to be more effective, to show really what the value is that you're selling. And there's a lot more coming. I mean, it's
John, you
really
mentioned a
remarkable.
few tools there that would be of use to us as a company, as a product company. And I'll take that as one example. And two is I was at the AWS Summit and I ran into a few companies that actually do a few things that could help us do what we're doing better and quicker and faster. But we had not known about those companies. And some of them are like, valued at over $500 million or a couple of $1 billion in one case. And I didn't know that those companies existed, right? I take these two as examples to just say that there are tools that we could benefit from as a product company at Snowpal. And I've looked for things that we've needed many a times on Google and Instagram and TikTok and whatnot, but I've never stumbled upon those tools and companies, which means sales is very important because those companies have not sold their products to companies like us, either through Instagram or through Facebook or through any other means. Which means even though they are almost $1 billion, maybe they're unicorns, maybe they're getting there, some case they're $2 billion companies, it is not good enough for them to just exist. They also have to have a sales team and a sales process and methodology and an outreach to reach companies like us. So we know that they do exist because after I found out one or two of those companies, we've actually subscribed to those plans. Now, I just want to summarize by saying that even large companies need to sell. Even Coca-Cola needs to have an ad. Even Tom Cruise for his Mission Impossible #9 had to do everything that he had to do, even though almost everybody should know who Tom Cruise is. And I believe almost everybody who watches cinema might know what Mission Impossible is, or at least have heard about it. So sales is important not just for people who are trying to make an impression. I think it's just as important that people have already made an impression, but need to continue to be relevant, right?
Yeah,
In that
look
sense,
at
right?
Google search. Google's trying to now compete with ChatGPT and Claude and all these
And
Gen AI
perplexity,
companies.
right?
And
Perplexity and
complexity, that I keep watching Google advertisements that they have AI too.
yeah,
It
it's
doesn't even cut
amazing.
through the clutter. It's like Google has AI. No, they don't. Like, even though they technically do,
Yeah.
people don't believe it, and they've lost that marketing war. And so even Google, what, top 5
Great
biggest company in the
example.
world, they are failing in selling their future product, and they're going to get really bad
And
hurt if
yeah,
they
and
cannot
Apple
get
is
people to use their
great.
Gen AI.
Great example, John. And I would add one more to it. Apple's failing to make an impression with the people, I think, in my opinion, that they are actually making enough progress with AI, right? They call it Apple Intelligence. Regardless, people are skeptical, right? Is Apple lagging behind in that AI race, right? And are they catching up? And the fact that they're showing interest in buying other companies like Perplexity clearly says that maybe they've made mistakes as well, right? I mean, there's a graveyard of tools that Amazon has built and never been able to sell, right? So the ideas, so I would say ideas have to be formed, like Mark Zuckerberg says, and not all ideas are going to be successful, even not for large companies. So you're going to have to try, fail, and keep going. And maybe the last thing to say is like the Rocky dialogue where Sylvester Stallone says, you're going to get beaten up, right? You're going to get beaten up, and you're going to be remembered by not how many, by how many. I'm paraphrasing what he says, right? Not by how many times you got beat up, but by how many times you got back up, essentially, right? This is amazing. John, I knew I was going to learn plenty. I've learned more than plenty. As we end this, any questions for me that you have?
No, I think this was a productive conversation about sales.
And hopefully, there's some learnings that you've had. I know I've had plenty from my side, and I know people watching this would have been like, oh my God, this seems obvious, but no, it's not. A lot of things that I felt were obvious about sales, it was not obvious to me. We made those mistakes, and we hope to have learned from those mistakes, right? So, folks, again, I know I caught John at a time when he had this long party from over the weekend. But John, thanks for again taking the time to have this conversation here. We'll include the links, much like we did the last time. John Betancourt, the CEO of Humantelligence. We'll include a link to John's LinkedIn profile and to John's company, so people can certainly check out, when they have needs for like talent and leadership development and beyond. Essentially,
Thanks so
that's
much,
basically
Chris.
it. Sorry, that's it. That's it, John. Unless you have anything else, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.